on what bees would need in order to keep them healthy. And that took me on a journey to native plants and looking at plant-pollinator interactions. So it wasn't just honeybees, but I discovered all these other bees as well. And one of the important things was I needed to take a look at plants that had amino acids, because 10 amino acids are essential and critical for growth, development, brood rearing, and lifespan for the honeybee. Pollen quality varies widely in plant species. I needed to look for plants that provided proteins, lipids, vitamins, minerals, and fats. Nectar is also needed for brood production. So I was looking at trees that would provide a good nectar source in early spring, just as the bees are gearing up with all their brood production. We have a lot of plants out there that have what I call optical attractiveness, but produce no pollen or pollen of minor nutritional value. And a really good example of this is Forsythia. So I realized that just a single taxon was not going to be enough, that I was going to really have to look into a high diversity of genus and species in order to accomplish all this. So nectar is the main source of carbohydrates for bees, and it's used to make honey by the honeybees. Their foraging decisions are made based on sugar content and floral nectar volume. And the bees are all deriving their nutrients from plant sources. So I had to study about this. I had to read. So one of my favorite books that I highly recommend to anybody here who is thinking about putting in a pollinator garden would be Heather Holmes' book, Bees. It's in the bottom right-hand corner, An Identification and Native Plant Forage Guide. In this book, she covers the interrelationships between bees and plants, their life cycles, their habits, and strategies for collecting pollen and rearing offspring. You'd learn about the attributes and characteristics of the plants and their native habitats. So this is an excellent book. It gives you so much information that you can definitely use. So I realized that we were going to have to learn to think holistically and not just from a human perspective. We have to think about the concept of a garden. Is it a garden for us? Is it a refuge for us? Or is this something for the whole world? And we need to use native plants that have evolved with a distinct suite of characteristics that include geographic distribution, morphology, and somebody had asked in the comments that you had, Andrew, about are certain bees attracted to different colors and plant shapes? That's morphology, and yes, most certainly they are, and Heather's book will tell you all about that. And you have to have things with a degree of genetic distinctiveness. And these native plants are naturally occurring with plant-pollinator interactions that have evolved. And we're talking about plants, native plants that have not been genetically altered by man. So many of the cultivars that you buy today have had the attractants bred out of them, so that maybe they have a longer bloom time, or they have the double ruffle that I mentioned before. So the other thing that I really wanted to consider when I was looking at this, you have this triangle, and with the flowers, you have to think of specialist bees. Now, remember, I just started this for honeybees, but I started discovering all of these other things. You need diversity, you need abundance. You need to have a good biomass of plants in order to really make a difference. And you need to consider phenology, which means you have to have plants that are blooming that are going to provide nectar and pollen throughout the entire season. You have supplements, additional food. So if you look over to the right where you have reproduction, you'll have host plants. But after those caterpillars, let's say, turn into butterflies or the moths, you need to have additional food. They need to be nectaring after that. You need to have plant nesting materials that you might have in your garden, hibernation sites. So that could be, old logs that you have in the back that are rotting away. So you can have bumblebees that might be right under the old logs, or, under the leaf litter that we definitely want to keep. And reproduction, you need host plants, you need nesting sites, and you need specific microhabitats. And I think some other people on your questions were talking about nesting sites. And that's one of the things that I'm interested in. And I'm going to try to expand that this year, because 70% of the native bees are ground nesting bees. And they really like to have no grass, no vegetation, sort of sandy soil. So they're not going to be using your garden where you have, added 3 inches of mulch to that. That will not work for them. So I'm hoping to do that. I've also taken down some trees that I've had cut up, and I have logs, and I'm hoping to use those, place them actually in the garden, and that those could be nesting sites as well. So here I got started. This is the one garden that I had out front, and this was along the driveway. I was not happy with this garden, and I really wanted to change everything. So I removed all the plant material that was in there. My neighbors, I was having a big problem with thistle creeping in from their lawn. And so I really wanted to put a border in. So I bought these antique barnstones. Well, the neighbor's daughter, who was grown and gone and didn't live there anymore, just had a fit when she saw these barnstones, because she thought they were big, the concrete barriers that you use on the highway. So this got delayed a little bit. There was much back and forth about the property line and so on and so forth. So I went ahead and decided I was going to go buy my plants, and the plants that you see on the left are from Scioto Gardens down in Delaware. And I go there, I go to Natives in Harmony. Now we have Meadow City Nursery, Avonlea, I've been there. I bring them home, I end up with all these plants lining the driveway. And I just put in this at the bottom of the right-hand side, mountcubacenter.org. If you are interested in taking a look at some of the cultivars of Echinacea, Monarda, plants like that, they have done extensive trials, and they have all of these things listed. They rank them according to pollinator visitations and many, many other criteria. So if you're wondering about that, I highly recommend that you check out mountcubacenter.org and see what they have to say. So as you can see on the left-hand side, because I had to move the stones in, I lost a good 2 feet of space. And that left me with a really teeny garden. And when you get up to as you're heading up to the end of the driveway, I mean, in some of I might have 2 feet there, and that's it. So that was really pretty small, and I wasn't happy about that. But I went ahead and put these plants in. And one thing that was really fortuitous is right when I was working on this, and that was by now it was the middle of September, I took a trip with a group of horticulturists and landscape designers to the Netherlands, and we were exploring what was known as the new perennial movement. And that was really sort of headed a little bit by Piet Oudolf. And whenever I give these talks, not very many people have heard of him. He designed the High Line, the Lurie Garden in Millennium Park in Chicago. And he also, just 2 years ago, designed the new Detroit garden at Belle Isle, which I would love to go see this year. It should be in its 3rd year. So we were taking a look at his house, at all of his gardens, all these native plants. And and also we were seeing plants that had already passed their prime. And that is where I really, really learned to appreciate the seed heads and the structure of the plants. That trip just did so much for me. It was really amazing. So this is the 2nd year of the garden, and things are coming along pretty nicely. I have agostiki, you can see Picanthium muticum, Veronicastrum, Helianthus in there. And in the center, the yellow flower is Silphium perfoliatum. And I truly did not believe that Silphium perfoliatum was going to get to be 8 or 10 feet tall, but it does get to be that tall. This plant is sort of a weird plant to be in a garden that's in such a narrow bed along the driveway. But I cannot tell you how many people, when they walk by, love this plant. They always want to know what it is. The goldfinches love this. When I'm going up the driveway or coming down in my car, I go very slowly and I will just see this, like, it's like fireworks, all these goldfinches just shooting out from there. So I really love that plant. You can see Retivita pinnata in there. There's Nepeta. So not every single thing is a native, but most of them are. So I thought, well, I just can't live with this little teeny thing on the edge of the driveway. That really isn't doing anything for me. So it was with a little bit of trepidation, because I live in Shaker Heights. We live on a street that morning and late afternoon, you have a lot of people that are going to and from work downtown. And I really was worried, are the plant police going to come after me? Am I going to have a garden that looks too weedy? So I had goals. So this garden had to be a garden for people. It had to read that way when they took a look at it. I didn't want it to look like it was a prairie or a naturalized meadow. It had to have native plants in it. It had to have some of those prairie meadow plants, but it still had to read as a garden. I wanted it to have beauty, enticement. I really wanted to inspire people who would walk by, ride their bikes by, to possibly emulate this at home. I wanted to increase awareness of native plants and plant-pollinator interactions. And you may ask, well, how do you do that? Well, if I'm out there gardening and anybody walks by, I just say, hey, do you want to come over here and take a look at this? Look at this bee, look at this butterfly, look at whatever. And they're always happy to do that. And I invite them into the backyard. So that's really a lot of fun. I really enjoy that. And I wanted to counter negative perceptions of bees and wasps, because I have a lot of plants along the edge of the driveway, such as Picanthium muticum, the mountain mint, that will always have tons and tons of different kinds of bees, native bees, the honeybees, and wasps on it. And I show them how you can stand right there. You can look at all of these bees and wasps, and they're not the slightest bit interested in you. They're just trying to either gather nectar or pollen. So then this is what the garden looked like 2 years ago. So this was taken probably in June. And now you can see that how tall the Silphium is getting. You can see a lot of different plants in there. I think the Lobelia syphilitica that I have right behind the stones at the end of the driveway aren't blooming. I also put signs out there. so that people understand what this garden is about. So I have a Xerces pollinator habitat sign, and I have monarch watch sign. So along, I'll get to that picture in a second. So here's a picture of the garden in, late May, early June. And you can see that along the edges, I have some smaller plants. So clearly the variegated sedum on the left isn't a native. I've got some lavender down there. I also put in usually a couple of clumps of parsley for the swallowtail butterflies. Down at the end, this is on the left-hand side, you can see the zizia that's still blooming. And you can see Monarda bradburyana that's back there. So I have the heuchera on the edge, and I try to make the edges with plants that are a little bit neater. There is a really famous landscape designer in Ireland. Her name is Helen Dillon, and she always says that if you have a tidy edge, you can have a messy middle. So yes, by the end of the season, the middle is getting a little messy and a little wild and woolly. But on the right-hand side, you can see the two women that are stopping. They're looking at the plants. They're reading the signs. So I'm happy about that. So here are more pictures where I'm really trying to give you a very immersive feel. And from what you saw before when I laid out those beds, it still isn't even that big. So I did go out and measure before I did this talk. And I only measured areas that actually would have native plants in them. So if I'm including some gardens on the side and gardens in the back, I really only have about 2,100 square feet. Here's some more pictures. So I like the idea of having plants mingling. Nobody's going to be, in isolation. And every year I take a look, I'm evaluating the plants. I'm seeing who self-sows, who's, maybe getting a little aggressive and maybe crowding out somebody else. So sometimes I will take out the plants. I will take out a portion of them. When I do that, I put them in pots. I take pictures of them, post it on Facebook and say free, whatever, come and get them. And so you can see on the right-hand side, I have Monarda fistulosa, which is a bumblebee magnet. A lot of people don't like to use Monarda fistulosa, which is the light purple, if you see here in the middle, and because it does tend to get powdery mildew. But you know what? I have other plants that are growing up next to it, and I just have to completely overlook that. I cannot count a few little dots on the leaves when I know the joy that it brings to these bumblebees. So these are some pictures of some areas in my backyard. And here are a few more little vignettes. The one on the right is Vernonia. That is one of my all-time favorite plants. I just love the flowers, and even when they finish blooming and as fall comes, they're a beautiful caramel color. So I will tell you, we're going to go through this and we're going to take a look at some of the native bees, wasps, and things that I found. I did, so some people may be watching this who are much better at IDing these things than I am. Everything that I found, I put on iNaturalist, and many things do get research grade. But if anybody's noticing something that is incorrect, please let me know. But I've gone through everything, and in this 2,100 square feet, And I have been documenting all this since 2016. I wanted to know, what is my garden doing? What is it providing? Who am I attracting? Well, I've ended up with 17 species of native bees, 15 species of native wasps, 5 bumblebees, 12 species of flies, the flower flies. I have 7 butterflies and 20 different kinds of birds. I also have spiders and beetles, but I'm not, and I'll show you some of those, but I really didn't count those up yet. So we'll take a look at a little video here. This is a native St. John's wort. And look at this bumblebee. I mean, they dog paddle through that thing. They are just so in love. And then you'll see there's a little Hylaeus, a little yellow faced bee right there. That's a native bee. And on the right, you can see again, there, that is the St. John's wort right there. And next to it, the tall blue is Cicarella Landscape, which I just put in a few years ago. And I have pictures of some pollinators on that coming up. So, you know, this is my goal with everything, was to take a look at the pollinators, and this is what we have in Ohio. And this is my goal. It started out with bees, but it ended up being so much more. So some of you may have seen this, this slide before. Claudia West had it, but all of this information, you can get this for yourself. Burkle et al., just Google that, and you will find the whole research project that they did on the plant-pollinator interactions. And so the other thing that I'm considering when I'm doing this is, how far can a pollinator fly to find food? So I do see a lot of these native bees, like the bicolored green sweat bee. They don't really fly that far away. And I'm really wondering, I don't know where all the nests are of all these different native bees that I have in the yard, and I would love to discover that. So these are things that you have to consider when you're building your garden. So one of the things too that's a really interesting concept is called central place foraging. And it's an evolutionary ecology model for analyzing how an organism can maximize foraging rates. So, for example, honeybees will increase their nectar load as time travel to a site increases. Beavers will collect larger diameter trees as the distance from their lodge increases. So these are things that I want to consider. I'd like to have nesting sites close by so that really the bees don't have to fly that far. So I'm going to just start off with one of the butterflies. I'm not going to dwell on this because everybody knows everything there is to know about monarchs. You see the egg, the larva. Here they are chomping away. I didn't have as many monarchs this year as I had last year. And an interesting thing that I just was reading said that if you want to attract more monarchs, you need to have your milkweed on the edge of your bed, not have it in the middle of your bed with other plants around it. They found that they got many more monarchs if it was planted on the edge. Black swallowtail butterfly, and this is some of the parsley that I plant along the edge in the garden, and every single year I get these caterpillars. And there is the butterfly. I had a lot of eastern tiger swallowtails. I have a lot of them every single year. I do have a tulip tree. I don't know if they're coming because if they're there because of that. And I have Eastern Comma and Pearl Crescent, and probably many of you may not realize that a foraging resource for either one of these butterflies is a New Balance tennis shoe. I have a lot of skippers. I'm just showing you a picture of a silver spotted skipper, but I have Peck's Zebulon Fiery Skipper. I probably have more, but I'm not that good at identifying all the skippers, and sometimes they can be pretty fast. So this was my most exciting thing that happened to me this year. Last year, or I should say this was last August, I forget that we're moving along in time, but 2 years ago, I planted 5 spice bushes, Lindera benzoin, on the property. I was going on a trip. I was going to Chicago in August, and for some reason I thought, you know what, before I go tomorrow, I'm just going to go out and just take a look at the leaves and see what I can find. And I was thrilled to find a few eggs. So even though I had packing to do and I had to get ready, taking care of these little eggs became my priority. So I cut the leaf off, and I cut several leaves, and I brought them inside. I've raised monarch butterflies, but I had no idea anything at all about the spicebush swallowtail butterfly. So I called Dan Jaffe from the Caterpillar Lab, and I spoke to somebody, it wasn't Dan, but somebody else, who talked to me about how they take care of them. But that didn't really work for me. But this is, and I can explain that in a little bit, but they have a very interesting adaptation in that when the larva hatches from the egg, and as they're growing in the first instar stages, they really look like bird poop. So this is supposedly to not have any birds or other predators pay any attention to them. So the early instar stages are brown with a white spiracular stripe. The fifth and here you can see, this is the other thing that they do, is they only eat at night. And I was hoping maybe they didn't really know that they were inside. I'm telling you, I would get up at 2 in the morning and go down with the flashlight on my phone to see if I could find them eating. I looked at these things, I bet, 20 times a day. And so you can see the leaf that's rolled up there. So one of the things that they do is they actually have silk that they will put out. As they get to be a little bit bigger, like the one on the left, they actually just sort of make this silk mat on the bottom. But before that, they will actually, their spinnerets, they will have little silks that they put, they're sort of putting them on the leaf like in a figure 8. As the silk dries, it closes the leaf over it. So by day, they are enclosed in this leaf, or they will be enclosed in the leaf while they're molting during those stages as well. And by the time they get to be into a later instar stage, they develop a pair of large tan false eye spots. Each eye spot has a large black pupil with a white false reflection. And I think you can see that in the picture on the left. So they also have these 6 blue dots on the abdominal segments, and each dot is ringed by a fine black line. So this adaptation is making them look a little more snake-like. So a predator would be warned off. You don't really want to eat me, I'm a snake. And if you actually sort of bother it, if you just sort of touch it a little bit, it will rear its head up, you know, put its little horns out and sort of wave itself about like a snake. Now, it was interesting because the stage for this butterfly was so different from a monarch. And you know, I kept thinking, well, is something wrong? Is everything going all right? So it takes them much, much longer to go through their life stages than it does a monarch. And right before they get ready to pupate, they turn orange. And here's one on the right that is beginning its pupation. It has attached itself to this stem. And here it is. And on the left, you can see the two, you can see the little silks that are holding it to the stem. Now, this is a butterfly that has to overwinter later. If it was earlier in the year, but this was later in the year. So it's going to have to go into diapause. It's going to have to overwinter, and it needs to be someplace cold. Now, at the caterpillar lab, they told me they put them in refrigerators, but I put mine up on the 3rd floor where it's pretty chilly. And then this will be the final product, I hope, when I bring them out next spring. Okay, then I'm going to go into spiders, because now I'm doing this. You're seeing part of my, what I call the wander and wonder, wait and watch, observe and discover. So I love finding these little crab spiders, sit and wait predator. Supposedly they can blend in with plant color, but I've been reading something else that says they don't necessarily always do that. So it will capture prey with its 2 front legs, bite it, inject venom to paralyze it. And another good reason to leave the leaf litter, because it lives in the leaf litter and the soil surface. So this is a beneficial insect for us. And here's one I found. Now this requires that you go out and you're not just standing there and looking, but you have to lift up the leaves and take a look at what's going on underneath on the leaves. That's where you're going to find your monarch eggs, your spicebush swallowtail eggs, anything like that. So spiders are great indicator species of how biodiverse the entire arthropod community is in your garden. Biological control and keeping the ecosystem in balance is important. And they're fascinating. I know you had a talk on some of this last week. So here's a wolf jumping spider that I found. I was cleaning out plants in the spring, and this little guy was right there. Another sit and wait predator. And you know, none of these spiders will bother you or hurt you at all. I have a large pot in my garden that's down by a pond. And one day I went down there and I saw this dark blob on the pot, and I thought, what the heck is that? So I took a picture and discovered it was a white banded fishing spider. I was really thrilled. It's a huge spider. They eat mostly aquatic insects, so that probably explains why I was finding it down by the pond. And then fall is always a fun time. And these are pictures that I took this fall of different things that I found. I have more, but I'm not going to put all the things I found. But the one on the left, where you see the spider web that looks like an A, I thought that was some secret message to me. Then we get into beetles. How am I doing on time? I better talk fast. Beetles make up 24% of all the animal species. There are 350,000 species of beetles. They have a very keen sense of smell, and they prefer a spicy, fruity, or fermented fragrance. They feed on pollen or nectar. This is a red milkweed beetle. And you often find them engaged in matters of the heart on milkweeds. The female lays her eggs at the base of the milkweed stem. The newly hatched larvae feed on the milkweed roots or within the roots. They overwinter in the root and may resume feeding briefly in the spring before they pupate. They pupate in earthen chambers and emerge in 1 month. They feed on milkweed leaves, buds, and flowers. They know how to cleverly, as many other insects do, sever the leaf vein upstream of their feeding site to minimize their exposure to the milkweed's toxic latex. So an interesting thing I discovered was that in 1957, there was a gentleman, Richard D. Alexander, who noticed that the red milkweed beetle made a shrill squeaking noise when he picked it up and held it. And by the way, they are completely harmless. They will not hurt your milkweed at all. Here's a locust borer beetle. They have actually disseminated some of the black locust trees, but I found one on my goldenrod. I've only seen a few, so I don't think I have a huge problem. And here's the large milkweed bug. Everybody knows this bug. If you have milkweed, you see it all the time. It does eat the stems, leaves, and seed bodies. And according to the Missouri Botanical Garden, they are really more of a nuisance than a threat. They do pierce the seed pod, but there are usually plenty of seeds. And on the plant, you're going to see all stages of development, the nymphs that are smaller and have no wings. So the IPM strategy that they recommend for this is, number 1, live with it. Number 2, sanitation, remove leaf litter and spent stalks to eliminate overwintering sites, or use insecticidal soap. It's a beautiful true bug, and it sequesters the toxins, and the bright colors are memorable, giving a hint that to any predators that you don't want to eat me. So interestingly enough, the cumulative educational effect for predators, for example, a blue jay that vomits after eating a large orange and black milkweed bug might later think twice before eating an orange and black butterfly. Then in the middle, you've got, oh, let me do this so you can see my. Then you'll see soldier beetles. They're harmless to plants, beneficial as pollinators. They're very active. They readily fly. So no problem there, but you will see several different kinds of soldier beetles. This one's a neat little beetle that I found this year, the white margin borer beetle, burrower beetle. It's a true bug, meaning again that they feed by piercing seeds. They feed on plants in the mint and nettle families. The adults overwinter in the leaf litter in the fall. The adults lay their eggs in the soil, and they exhibit a wonderful maternal care for their young. I'm not really sure how that was determined, but I think scientifically. It's a benign bug. It won't damage your plants at all. And then on the right-hand side there are lots of leaf beetles, and they can be used to control invasive weeds. Okay, so here's one of my favorite things right here. A couple of years ago, I was out in the garden, and I go out to my garden every day, many times. I'm out in the morning, the afternoon, the early evening. I'm checking all the plants. You know, the plants all have nectar that they release at different times. So there's lots to see. So anyway, I went out one day and I saw this thing had captured this honeybee. And I decided I was going to cut that off and bring it inside. I put it on a white paper plate and took a picture of it. So this is an ambush bug. So each foreleg has teeth-like structures that mesh into similar structures on the lower leg. So they will grab their prey. It's a sit and wait predator again. And they will grab their prey with the front legs, their forelegs, and then their hind legs also go in. So there's no way that that predator is going to go anywhere. Then it's going to insert its short beak into the bug, into the bee, the beetle, whatever, and it shoots in enzymes that will dissolve the innards of the insect, and then it will suck out the bodily fluids. What can you say? It's just part of the ecosystem. So I knew nothing about this bug. I had to Google everything to find out about it. And here is an interesting little tidbit that I found out. You can see the figure on the left, that there's actually a fictional superhero in the DC Comics called Ambush Bug. His alter ego name is Erwin Schwab. And on the right-hand side, this is a picture of late bone set, and you can see several ambush bugs on the bone set, and you can see a green sweat bee there. There's another bee that's on the far left. I did not have a National Geographic moment there, but it was interesting to see all the ambush bugs there. Bumblebees, I'm showing you some of the bumblebees that I see in my garden all the time. Of course, we all know Bombus impatiens. And here's one of the behaviors of bees, that male bees never go back to the natal nest after they leave. And so they need to find a place to sleep at night. So they sort of hang out on the underside of leaves or flowers. This is Calone Lyonii hot lips with this bumblebee. Look at her, she's so happy. Hopefully my neighbors are all used to seeing the skulking around all the time and all the plants. But she'll be coming out here. Happy girl. Okay, this is one of my favorite bees that I found, Bombus fervidus, the great northern bumblebee. And I've really only seen this bee twice. So these pictures are terrible pictures. It's just with my iPhone. And I came downstairs to get the mail. And of course, I'm right there by the garden. I can't resist going over just to take a peek to see what's going on. And I see Bombus fervidus. I didn't have my phone with me. I went racing up the stairs, grabbed the phone, came downstairs. I thought, oh, that bee is going to be gone. But she was still there, and I got these pictures. Now, this is a very interesting bee. They nest in a loose mass of soft, lightly entangled grass mixed with goose or other feces. Ooh, yuck. The nest is grassy in open areas. It can include forest edge along roadsides and typically below ground. So I'm not sure, where is this bee coming from? Nests are typically within 50 meters of a food source. They mix saliva with pollen to make a little bit of honey. They spend a lot of time foraging and pollinating plants. The typical nest has 4 eggs, 15 larvae, 42 pupa, and 17 adults. 10 of the adults are workers. The pupa are 37 males, 5 future workers, and only 1 queen. The workers' typical lifespan is 34 days. They typically forage in the afternoon. One bee can visit as many as 44 flowers per minute. Sometimes they work so long at such a rapid pace, they die of exhaustion. Maybe that explains why we're losing some of them. I don't know. But that's one of my favorite bees. This is the carpenter bee that we all know and love. And here she is, hopscotching on Geranium maculatum, which is a great plant for the shady garden. Melisodes longhorn bees, and again, these are solitary ground nesters, and the pictures you see are of the males, and there they are sleeping. Or you could have, they do like to huddle together, and they're awfully cute. This is a very interesting thing to notice, because I'm always taking a look at the behavior. Why are they doing this? Why are they foraging like this? How are they using the plant? So here's something called revolver architecture, where separate compartments are formed. Each compartment holds part of the total nectar reward. Therefore, a potential pollinator has to probe every separate compartment to harvest the nectar of the flower, which of course increases the time that the bee is on the flower and hence can pick up pollen. So you'll see them go. I'm going to play that one again. Oh, here's this. Wait, wait. Because this is so fast. And the next one, you'll see on the echinacea, there aren't nearly as many floral compartments. So this bee, Bombus impatiens, has to go around very methodically. So take a look next time. That's something that I show people when they're walking by. So here we are with the green sweat bees. Oh, it's 8:01. These are tiny, blindingly fast. So if you want to see a lot of these bees, you need to go out into your garden, just stand there, just stand still and wait, and you will see everything that's going on. I love watching her little wings. Here is an orange-tipped wood digger bee. This is, again, that Scutellariae incana. And it's such a small flower. I never dreamed that a big bumblebee, but I saw a lot of bumblebees on this plant as well. Small carpenter bee, modest mass bee. Here's a cuckoo bee. These are specialist cuckoo bees. They kleptoparasite their relatives in the Megachile genus. The females use that point that you see on the end of their abdomen to pierce through the nest lining, leaf or petal pieces, to lay one or more eggs in a host's fully provisional brood cell. The third instar larva develops a sickle-like mandible to destroy the host bee egg or larva. Nice. That's life. And this is the European wool carder bee. This is a bee that was introduced accidentally, and we have several of those. The Agapostum, the bicolored striped sweat bee, one of my favorite bees. It's so gorgeous. Oh, that was on here. That's Silphium perfoliatum that's on. And this is bone set, Eupatorium perfoliatum, and watch this. The diversity of bees and wasps on this is amazing to me. And that's definitely, I have that plant in my garden, and that's a very good native plant to have. Okay, somebody also asked about bee hotels. I'm really running over a little bit. So I noticed something very interesting this year. I was down by my potting shed and I noticed this huge bee. I had no idea at all what this was. And you can see that grass-carrying wasps have already used a lot of these openings and made their nests. So I discovered upon Googling this that it was the giant resin bee, Megachile sculpturalis. This is an introduced species. It comes, it's native to Asia, and they were first confirmed in North Carolina early around 1994. They came in at a commercial port. They're cavity nesters, and basically what they do is they will displace other bees from their nests. Usually it's carpenter bees, but in this case, this is where they were. So I watched them all the time. So you can see he's pulling out the grass that the grass-carrying wasp has used to cap off the nest. The female is the larger bee. If you look to the picture on the right, here's a plant that I have just below this, and you can see all of the pieces of grass or straw that they have dropped right on that little cactus. So this is how successful they were. They ended up, here's one of the larvae that they ended up pulling out. And here's the picture of the finished product where they have now put everything in there. So what's interesting is that they have different cells, and they can repeat this process where they're, provisioning the nest with a pollen ball. They lay an egg, and then they'll put in another pollen ball, lay another egg. They can lay as many as 10 cells per nest. The larvae will pupate in the spring, and the adults will emerge in early summer. They're harmless. They're not aggressive. They usually fly away from humans. Overall, the ecological impact is considered benign, but this is a bee that's introduced. It's a bee that does displace other bees. So, I look at this and I count all these up and I think, wow, if there are 10 in there for each one, should I really let them emerge? What should I do? Right now, it's in the garage. Flies, I have lots of little flies. Now, remember this tiger bee fly in just a minute. Okay, this is not a great picture. Opened my back door. I looked on the tree, and here was a brown-legged grass-carrying wasp who had caught a cricket. And here she is, bringing it over. She's now next to the house. Then she's still flying around. So it took her a little while to orient to the hole. Now, this is an empty hole from a carpenter bee. Oh, let me go back. So she did go in there. She provisioned her nest. She capped it off with grass. And then a few days later, I found, maybe it was more than a few days, a larva, on the stoop right underneath, and the pieces of grass. I found out that the tiger bee fly is a fly that likes to go in and take over a bumblebee or a carpenter bee nest. So I don't know, maybe that was why the tiger bee fly was there. I was a little curious. My son noticed upstairs, he wanted to plug something in, and look what we have here. And this was identified as an Asian mud dauber wasp on iNaturalist research grade. Here's the great golden digger wasp, one of my favorites. Most of these wasps are very gentle. They really don't sting. They just like to do their own thing. I love this wasp. Here you see it on Picanthium muticum. the great black wasp, the fraternal potter wasp, four-banded stink bug. And so they are the, the main predator of the marmorated stink bug. Yay for them. The cicada killer, that's Ohio's largest wasp, solitary, but the females probably nest in close proximity. The non-stinging males patrol the nest entrance to ward off intruders, and they fly to the tree canopy to search for cicadas. The one, I did not take this video in my garden, but these were garlic chives. I have never seen such a party before on garlic chives. It was amazing. More of these. These are all in my yard. Green lace wings, eggs. Now you have to really be looking at your leaves to find these. I'm running late. I'm going to try. Okay, and here's Chrysanthemum uticum. Let's smudge them. Okay, here's some native plant information sources for you if you want to look up. They will tell you, give you plant lists for your ecoregion. iNaturalist is available for free. I use that all the time. LEAP has a plant list. They also list native plant nurseries. Xerces is a great source of information, as is Wildlands. And I'm happy to say that Wildlands has a new Greater Cleveland chapter. Uh-oh, what's happening? I don't know what happened to the rest of my slides. That's kind of weird. Oh, okay, here we go. I don't know why this is happening like this, sorry. Okay, so this is sort of the takeaway here. And you're recording this so people can come back and see this. And paying attention is a form of reciprocity with the living world, receiving gifts with open eyes and open heart. And I had a birdhouse in my garden on one of my trees, and I was walking back there one day and I felt like something was looking at me. And there was a southern flying squirrel. And this other one, the picture on the right, I was hiking one day and came across this gentleman. I was shocked when he went past me and I saw that he was taking his parrot for a hike. He said his parrot loves to hike and be out in nature. Thank you very much.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was muted the whole time.
Oh.
I was talking for about 2 minutes there. Sorry. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Anne. Anne, if you see in the chat box, there's a ton of people saying thank you and how much they really enjoyed the program and sharing some information. If you want, you can take a look at the Q&A. And I can pull it up here and we can maybe go through some of those questions. One person asked what type of camera or lens that you use for getting some of your close-up shots.
I'm just using my iPhone.
Excellent. Yeah, especially those new iPhones. The macro lens on those are really really good. So it's amazing what you can do with a mobile phone these days. Let's see. Reese asked, "Have you experienced? Oh, geez, some of these words with mountain mint, and if so, what is your impression as a nectar plant?"
Of mountain mint,
Yeah.
Cantor Unicum, fabulous. It's a fabulous plant. It's always got insects on it. Of course, later in the summer, you'll see more of the wasp on there as well.
Hmm.
No, it's a great plant. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah. Reese had the scientific name on there, so I had a little trouble pronouncing that.
uh, well, everyone should really try to learn the botanical names.
Yeah.
Somebody says, explain what biomass is in regards to square footage. Well, you'll be able to attract pollinators, but the volume of pollinators, might be smaller because you don't have enough biomass, with a lot of plants in your garden. So you'll still be able to accomplish something. You're still contributing. So I wouldn't worry about that. It's no matter, everybody can make a difference with a small patch of land.
And it looks like a lot of people are asking you to share your plant list. Did you have a slide that had a lot of your plants?
No, but I can put one together for you.
Okay. If it's not too much of an ask,
no.
if we do get that, everybody will put that on our website under the recording of this week's webinar. So where we usually put resources, we can stick that in there as well. So
somebody said the name of the tall yellow plant, that is Silphium perfoliatum, which the common name is cup plant. The name of the Netherlands landscaper is Piet, Piet, Aldolf, Oudolf.
Nice.
Thistles. What happened to the thistles? Well, I don't know. We just completely ripped everything out of that bed, and I have never had another problem with thistles again. I mean, I don't use any pesticides. I use no mulch. I leave my plants up all winter long. I do have to cut the silphium back a little bit, otherwise they'd be all over the driveway. So again, the genus that attracts the tall yellow flower with the birds, the finches, that was the Silphium perfoliatum. What is the purple spiky plant? I'm not sure what that is. How do you prevent deer from eating the plants? I don't really have too much of a problem with that at all. I do have some phlox in front that the deer will eat, and I just go out and spray that with Repelsol, and that keeps them away. I did not have to clear anything with the city. Everybody seems to like it. It's so, people drive by, they'll yell out the window, "We love your garden." It's really been fun. People leave me notes all the time. So I'm very grateful that, people have responded the way in which they have. Honeybees are not going to hurt mason bee houses, mason bees at all. Do I think they hurt when gathering nectar and pollen? Well, that's sort of an ongoing thing now that honeybees could be out competing native bees. But let's not forget that many of the mason bees that we have here are not the native mason bee. So you have to be careful when you get those. Consulting services, happy to do that. Somebody says, do you have suggestions for full shade native plants? In our last session, I mean, I do, but in our very last session, series 5 on March 1st, we have 2 people. Roy Diblick is one of them, who will be talking about bringing the woodland home, how to add native shade plants to your garden. And Uli Lorimer, the director of horticulture from the Native Plant Trust, is going to talk about designing with native ferns.
Nice.
So
Maybe-
watch
Maybe just a few more, Ann, and then we'll call it a night.
Cosmos. I don't think Cosmos provides a lot. Do you divide and share plants? I do. I don't really use bee houses. That one was just up, and it was very interesting to observe that this year. So okay, somebody's asking a long thing. If you want to, can you send me some of the chat and I could get back to people?
Why don't your information is up there on the screen, and if people,
Oh, if they want to email me,
yeah,
okay.
if you really have a burning question for Ann that you want to talk to her about, feel free to reach out. Serious inquiries, and yeah, we'll call it a night there. And thanks again so much. We really enjoy having you on for tonight's webinar, and we want to thank you for being part of this, and thank everyone that's still on and watching.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, hope everyone has a great night. We will see you in 2 weeks for our next presentation of the Northeast Ohio Pollinator Society winter webinar series. And yeah, from Ashtabula County, Andrew Holden, Ohio State Extension, signing off. We'll see you all in 2 weeks.